Hello, can you hear me? Yeah, good morning and welcome to Spectacle on Television Nigeria today. I am very sorry for coming behind schedule. However, we want to look at the policy of the minimum wage under the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari. We will be looking at the implication and the productivity as regard the minimum wage. That is the economic implication and productivity. And today with me in the studio of TVN, I have an economist in the house, a young, vibrant economist, Mr. Onjefu Awulegbe Samuel. Samuel, you are welcome to the studio of Television Nigeria.
Thank you, sir.
And in the middle, as you can see, is my in-house analyst, a civil rights activist, and a political affairs and a public affairs commentator, Mr. Silvanus Okwe.
It's my pleasure.
You're welcome to TVN.
Thank you.
Today's spectacle, I want us to look at the economic implication and productivity of this vibrant and striking policy, the minimum wage that the president, both the National Assembly have, passed into law. The increment from 18,000 naira to 30,000 naira for civil servants and as well public servants. I will begin with you, the economist, Mr. Jeff. What is minimum wage?
Thank you. Minimum wage is that enumeration increased of workers, let's just assume income earners wage.
Okay.
In complementation of their entitlement from their employers of labor.
Okay. So employers of labor.
Yeah.
Their entitlement.
Yeah.
And the increment in their emolument.
Yeah. It is that enumeration increase.
Okay. And how does this policy of increment, came about? This policy of, for instance, the history from Obasanjo's time as president to Yar'Adua's time as president to Jonathan's time as president, and now President Muhammadu Buhari's time, and then today we have the minimum wage to be 30,000 naira. What?
Well, I think, according to my best of knowledge, it is a set-aside policy of review of the income of the wage earners, specifically in the working force setting.
Okay, specifically in the civil service commission?
It's not commission.
Okay.
It has to do entirely with anything that has to do with productivity of labor.
Good.
Which includes even the private and
public sectors.
The public sectors.
All right. Minimum wage. How minimum do you think this wage is? And in contrast to Nigerian productivity, how maximum do you think it is also?
Well, I think it has a long way to go from my best of understanding, because it is a joy for every income earner to celebrate an increase in his wage bill, and aside also to do with a lot of expenses to be done in his day-to-day household activities. So if you ask me, I must be honest with you, it has a long way to go for them all. Specifically, you cannot begin to a kind of discredit an increase in somebody's welfare for a kind of a mere criticism. You get me?
Yeah.
It is an obtainable policy that is supposed to be, in short, is subject to be reviewed time to time.
All right, so, I'll come back to you. I want to how minimum it is to the Nigerian workers, the civil servants and the public servants, and how maximum in terms of productivity that it will generate. I will come back to you. Let me ask my young activist here, fire right activist, and a public affairs analyst, from your view, the minimum wage, as you said, is a policy. What established this policy, first of all?
Thank you very much. When we talk about minimum wage, we are talking of the least, just minimum. What it means, in essence, from the start, is that anybody who is employed by the government, even from the lowest level, will not collect less than 30,000 naira.
Will not collect less than 30,000.
That is the minimum.
That is the minimum.
From the word minimum wage.
And let's look at the policy. Now, the minimum is 30,000.
Yes.
The policy,
it will be a geometric increment depending on your salary. It must reflect on everybody's salary. But let me first of all, before dabbling into discussing in extension, the policies behind this minimum wage, I will say without any iota of the contradiction that this is one of the best policies that has been introduced into the civil service system in Nigeria. And I will add that I commend President Muhammadu Buhari and the ruling All Progressive Congress for being part of this history. Before the introduction of this 30,000 minimum wage, we had 11,000 minimum wage introduced in 2011 by the government of President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan.
Okay.
That then was $110. But coming to 2014, it became $50. It was the worst minimum wage in Africa and other developing countries.
Why do you say that?
$50,000 as minimum wage cannot equate to some war-torn countries' minimum wage. We had something like Libya collecting 500. We have something like Algeria, 514. We have something like Lesotho collecting 300 and something. We have Ghana, 200 and something. Dollars, I'm talking of dollars. And Nigeria was collecting partly $50. And you cannot juxtapose this with the salary of the government officials, which rings in millions. That's basic salaries, not to talk of other side benefits.
It was still under Jonathan that
I will comment increment to 11,000. Oh, to 18, sorry. To 18, yes. I'm mistaken. To 18,000. Yeah. Then President Muhammad Buhari took it to 67% increment.
The 12,000 additional.
It's 67% increment, but unfortunately, $83, which is still below the air. But while we commend the government for the bold step, we will also beseech the Nigerian successive governments to adhere to the letters, our constitution, which stipulates that there must be an upward review of the minimum wage for 5 years, because this has not been adhered
it means
since 2011.
Every 5 years.
Within 5 years, not every. Within. You can review tomorrow. You can review next tomorrow.
Okay, within 5
years, there must be an upward review of minimum wage. If you go back to history, the historical background of our minimum wage, you trace it back to 1981, when 125 naira was the minimum wage. It was $200. Nigerian civil servants were one of the best in the world during that 1981.
Yes.
But now we have come down to $83 minimum wage.
Because
are we going up or are we coming down?
At that time, at that 1981 you are talking about, there was what we call production. That's why the economists here will throw more light. We had production and we were completely depending on agriculture as our GDP. Today, from 1985, precisely from my understanding and little history I did about how did we get here, we started diverting from agriculture. We abandoned the granite pyramid of the north. We abandoned the cocoa of the southwest. We also abandoned cement, oil, palm tree, palm front, and all those things, minings, the coal at Enugu, the cement in Benue, and so on, the palm fruit in Benue, and even the yam, the production of agricultural produces. We were completely, a productive nation. And when we diversify into oil, we became a consuming nation instead of, moving up economically so that our economy will boom better than the time we were depending on agriculture.
Do you blame the civil servants or you blame the government?
No, it was under the government of President Ibrahim Babangida, the military.
Let us not pin it to an administration.
Yes.
Do you blame the civil servants for this deterioration in our productivity?
No, it is the policy of the government. It is the policy of the government. But now we have returned to agriculture.
We need to suffer it, the civil servants.
The civil servant, I am of the advocacy.
The evil policies of the government.
Yes, the evil policies then is not an evil policy per se. It is a kind of a derail in implementing a righteous policy, people-oriented policies. Because the IBB administration then was looking at oil as, oil has come. Instead of adding oil to the agricultural sector, to see we have two main domestic products now that could bring gross domestic income. They completely introduced a structural adjustment and abandoned the agricultural sector. Went into the oil and other mineral sector. Even other minerals were not being excavated. Nigeria, I think, is one of the countries that have, out of the major mineral and natural resources, the world-known major and mineral and natural resources, about 26 world-known. We have about 24. From oil to Constantine to gold to coal and to whatever we have it. So why don't we diversify or make sure that all these mineral resources are performing into our economy? Okay, let me come back. We have gone back to agriculture under President Muhammad Buhari, and agriculture seems to be the bane of our economic diversification now, though we still depend on oil and we still depend on the dollars and the pounds. Now, Mr. Samuel Awulegbe, you are an economist. I want to, this minimum wage issue, do you think it will bring minimum or maximum productivity into the Nigerian economy? I want you to iron that aspect out for me.
Yeah, certainly, I must be honest with you, it will go a long way.
Okay.
Because first, it is a kind of a cultural behavior with the household that upon every increase of his earning has a comparative influence on his spending behavior. First of all, it will go a long way increasing the level of the revenue generation. Okay. You understand? Okay. Then from there, also increase a lot of productive activities in the household, in the life of the household owners. Sorry. What I mean by that is this.
Explain the revenue generation aspect.
Okay, the aspect of the revenue generation is this. If there is a tendency of an increment in the worker's wage bill, you get me? And he tends to, let's just assume, a piece of this behavior of getting a pair of shoes, let's assume every month, upon an income of an average of, let's just assume, 60,000 naira. And there is this tendency of an increment from 30,000 naira to 50,000, automatically from 60,000 to 100,000 naira, you will have to notice a certain behavior in him, which is if he's getting a pair of shoes as a usual culture of life, which he live as a household monthly from this earning, there is a tendency of him getting two. Okay. And that getting two has a kind of a complementing effect to the revenue generation of the community or the locality where he's based.
Or the government or the service where he's rendering.
So, in essence, what am I trying to say? You consider the value-added tax upon that commodity he purchased.
That is VAT.
Yeah. And from there, you begin to make comparison of other related avenue of his
how do you consider the value-added tax of that income, that minimum wage? So it means it has a economic implication. I will not just go and collect my additional 12,000. Is it 12,000? How is the percentage calculated? Is it if I'm receiving 150,000 monthly? Is it 150% multiplied by 30 or multiplied by 12? 12 is the increase.
Yeah. From
18 to 12, and 100 is a percentage. Is it like 100 and?
If you are calculating by the 12% increase,
yes,
from the recent effect,
yes,
you understand? It is the old one now.
Okay.
You are supposed to divide by 100 and multiply by that 12.
By that 12. So the 12 is the increase.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So the 12, if I divide 150 by 100%, which is like 5.0. If I can use my calculator, let me use my calculator and see, because we have to get this right, and the Nigerian people have to know what is actually minimum wage. If I receive 150,000 naira and I divide it by 100, it gives me 1,500 naira. 1,500 naira multiply by 12. I have 18,000 naira. 18,000 naira plus my actual basic statutory salary, which is 150,000 naira. 150,000 naira. So I'll be collecting 168,000 naira per month. Now, what is the VAT of this percentage? Is it the VAT that I'm going to be paying to the government now, the new VAT? How is it calculated?
As an income earner, the government derives their VAT directly without even coming to you. It's deducted from there.
And do you think they will deduct the right amount, judging from the calculation?
Yeah.
The public servant, is it the same thing with the public servant? Because I have seen anomalies from the Public Service Commission where I've worked. I get me. Sometimes arbitrarily they cut some money without even notifying you. You ask, they say it's VAT, and when you sit down and calculate the VAT, it's not equal to the amount they cut. They can even cut even more than the VAT.
On that particular situation, I must be honest with you. Policies of any corporate organization varies from organization to organization.
Okay.
There might be reasons for that deduction per se, you get me, without even notifying the income earner. And it is subject to the policy of the type of firm where you find yourself. But I must tell you, in the government setting, every deductions are made accountable for. And before any deduction, there must be an explicit information to be carried out, at least to notify the income earner that something of this nature is about to take place.
Now,
that he gets himself prepared.
Okay. Now, if I'm coming to you, barrister, activist, if I receive 182,000 naira now, the VAT you're talking about, VAT must be deducted. If the VAT is deducted from what I earn, then what is the essence of the increment, the increment of the minimum wage?
I must get something straight. In essence, when we are talking about a kind of an increase in minimum wage, it comes with a competing tax generation ratio as well.
Okay, a competing tax generation ratio.
Yeah. It has to be specific per the level at which you find yourself in that firm.
Okay.
Also, by this notification, it has to do with the level of what you earn. It is not on a random.
Okay.
You understand?
Yes.
It is a fixed ratio of deduction.
Okay.
And that ratio applicable to all. So if, let's assume, if it's on the ratio of 0.5%,
yes.
You get me? A deduction of your tax is supposed to be done from your salary.
Okay.
And you are an income earner of 10,000 naira, that ratio goes for your 10,000.
Okay.
Same ratio go for somebody earning 20,000. So whatever is to be deducted from you can never be equal with somebody earning higher than you.
But
the higher you earn, the more tax you pay. And
that the tax you pay, does it
more
have
like a comparative?
A comparative. Does it have particular percentage, like a VAT, for instance? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Is it 20%? That is what I want, so that when someone receives his minimum wage and deduction is being made, the person should be able to know the actual deduction that should, the expected deduction that should go out of his minimum wage.
On that,
yes,
I must be precise.
Yes.
States, federal government, and even the local government settings has their type of ratio of deductions.
Okay.
It is not equal.
Okay.
In certain cases. I don't know of the civil service system in Nigeria, particularly, to be said. Like making a general kind of analysis on it that this is
5%.
You understand? 10%. This is the ratio of the tax deduction.
Okay.
You get me? I cannot be specific on that. But I tell you, there is a specific ratio of deduction that exists.
Okay. Now, do you see inflation, coming up to this, bringing economic implication, like, as with respect to this minimum wage?
Yeah, certainly there must. Because I must be honest with you, per every increase in cash flow has a derivative force of inflation.
Okay.
One, with this minimum wage, first is an increase, you get me, in the spending behavior of the household, which is the income earner, you get me, and the circulation of flow within the setting of the economic a kind of spectrum of, let's assume, the nation at large to be discussed. So in this situation now, where an income earner of 10,000 naira have grown to 30,000 naira by implication, you get me? It's already telling you there is an increase in the activities of the cash within the circulation. And by behavior, you get me? It a kind of encourage more spendings and more budgetary. Likewise, savings.
And then
and
supply.
Thank you. You don't just justify supplies to this condition yet, because wherever you are justifying supply in this manner, there have to be a comparative a kind of implication of also demand. You get? Because if the supply is high, automatically it calls for an increase in demand.
So now,
you understand?
What state could you put minimum wage? They have increased your salary to 12,000 naira increase for you. What kind of do you have anything to say about that? My activism
about the increment.
The increment, does it have any economic implication?
Yes.
And also, I will give you a chance to also speak about the productive aspect of this increment.
Yes.
Because oftentimes we view the civil service in Nigeria not to be productive, especially when it comes to internally generated revenue. Because at the local government, I've observed that sometimes civil servants they virtually do nothing in the office. And administrative functions could be going on, they are signing signatures and so on. And cash doesn't seem to come. What is their productive capacity and productive, economic productivity? That is what I want to get straight. Because if you are productive at the local level, state level, and federal level, you should have income.
The Nigerian civil service system produce people who just go to the office in the morning and come back in the evening without any input in the system.
Yes.
And they cannot be entirely blamed.
Okay.
There are no industries. There are no manufacturing companies.
Okay.
There are no places for these persons to go. They might have potentials. They might have engineers, but all of them run away to countries where they can be engaged. If you're an engineer, you might end up sitting in the office from morning to night reading papers. There is no way you can effect any changes in your area of study. You understand? It is just the country.
So the economic,
there is no economic improvement engineered or occasioned by the civil service system in practice in Nigeria. The only thing is that they are engaged to reduce the level of unemployment. That's what the government often does. They put out adverts, get people engaged in the civil service just to write in their manifestos or in their campaigns during elections that they employed so persons. Not that the employed persons will have any input in the society. They don't give back. Like in Nigeria, I know some persons who work in the ministry. You don't go for work for 1 month and nobody questions you. Because even if you go to the office, some don't have desks where they sit. Their names are just there to collect salary. But I will also comment on whether it will question inflation or not.
No. What the point you just raised now, before you get to the inflation aspect of it, talking about doing nothing, most of the civil servants do nothing. Now, the increment, will it increase their productivity? Or you are saying that there is nothing to be done?
Administratively, the civil service is the engine house of the government.
Yes.
Administratively.
Yes.
But the staffing of the civil service in Nigeria is too much that some persons will not go to work for 1 month and the government will not notice. The persons who work are few. Without the civil service, there is no way the government can work, because through Ministry of Power, they go to villages, rural electrification, and all these things. But how many of them are needed to carry out such activities? In country where there are industries and manufacturing companies, you see that civil service is very low. People who work in the civil, the percentage is low. What they do is paper carriers. They write papers, they carry, they transmit. There is nothing.
So you are saying that Nigerian productivity is paper certification and paper transfer.
That is it.
Now, so what do you now see about the implication of this? What is the implication?
Yes, the implication of this, before this minimum wage, things were higher than usual.
Yeah.
The minimum wage before 18,000, which was $110, went down to $50. For them to cope, there was need to increase it. And even the increment brought it to $83, sorry. Now, if the amount of money you have cannot even satisfy your need, which one will cause the inflation in the society? This is an anti-labor analysis. But I will not tell you for sure that this will cause inflation, but I do know that the prices of things increased. That is why I'm praising this government for looking through the plight of the people, coming to intervene in the deteriorating welfare of the Nigerian citizens, because the government itself came to power on some tripartite policies, fighting corruption, insecurity, and changing the status quo.
I wouldn't mind if I check on.
Yes.
Okay.
You don't want to chip in something.
You have 2 minutes. After that, we'll go for a short break and come back.
You see, the implication of the inflation, the implication of inflation on the minimum wage, I really want to explain something of a serious there. You see, when there is increase in income, with that derivative effect of increase in the spending behavior of a household, there is something notable about that. When the increase becomes too high on a firm, let's assume a productive firm in a setting of a community, you get me? Automatically, it will give rise for the firm as well to increase the level of its productivity.
Good.
Thereby increasing the level of its workforce. You get me? And thereby, as you are expanding the workforce, you get me? It also calls for another comparative influence of you effecting to the payment of whichever body is coming in, and also increasing the income of the wage earners within the setting, you get me, as a result of overlabor.
Based on capacity.
Thank you. And also to meet up with the market demand. Therefore, in these circumstances, let me also explain something to you. The consequences of that increment in the workforce of that particular firm within the setting of this community or within, in short,
let's look at it from the view of civil servants.
Okay, that is the view of the civil servant I'm discussing. Let's just assume from these instances now, you get me, where maybe you buy 2 biscuits every day for consumption. And with this increase in your wage, you intend to maybe increase it for proper satisfaction. You get me? And the producer of that biscuit happened to notice a change in the market, trying to meet up with demand, increase productivity with more labors. Don't you think you have to pay for the laborers?
Of course.
And that practical aspect of him paying for the laborers, as well as, you understand, engaging them across time limit, which they are supposed to, also call for another implication of additional wage. By that additional wage, let me also make something clear to you. By this implication of the firm increasing its workforce lies on the pocket of the civil servant. You know why? Because when he increased this amount of his workers, his laborers, the tendency of not meeting up with the revenue generation of his productive activities will call for another increase in cost, which lies in the pocket of the buyer, the consumer.
So in essence, you are saying that the increment in the minimum wage is productive or?
Yeah, it's productive.
I have to submit to his professionalism in analyzing this.
All right, shortly, we will take a short break, and when we come back, we will still look critically how productive is the Nigerian economy now with respect to the minimum wage, the increments that have been added. Will it encourage, you understand, encourage the workers? Do we have areas, facets, enterprises where people could be productive? The submission of your submission have said that it is a paper certification and the signatory and transfer is purely administrative. So we'll go into economic functions, especially
and the politics, the wrangling of the government.
I also think regarding the
anyways, 2 minutes after this timeout, we'll come back to you, economist and my far-right activists in the studio. Spectacle will continue shortly.
Boko Haram insurgents. Some have in the process paid the ultimate price, while many will forever live with indelible scars occasioned by their determination to protect the country, no matter the hurdle. Despite these, they have remained resolute and undaunted, and today, all territories the insurgents once took control of have been recaptured and normalcy restored. And now, for the first time in a long time, the end of Boko Haram is foreseeable. Therefore, the wisest thing for the remaining insurgents to do is to surrender today or face total destruction from the army. Remember, the Nigerian army will stop at nothing to ensure that total peace is restored in all parts of the country. So, be wise and embrace peace today or get ready to be ruthlessly dealt with. This message is brought to you by the Coalition on Conflict Resolution and Human Rights in Nigeria.
To the success of the fight against the Boko Haram terrorists. And then you look at also the factor of morale.
Welcome back to Spectacle on Television Nigeria. We are discussing the minimum wage, economic implication, and productivity. Of recent is one policy that the administration of President Muhammad Buhari have passed into law. And today, in the studio with me, is Mr. Silvano Zope, a far-right activist, Comrade Silvano Zope, a far-right activist and a public affairs analyst. And I have an economist with me in the studio in the person of Jelfu Samuel Awulegbe. Now, let me start from you, my far-right activist. You have discussed the implication, you have discussed the productivity aspect of it. I want us to look at this area where a 18,000 naira formal minimum wage, which is still on, because this one has not been implemented It was difficult for some state governors to pay. And when you look at the federal allocation going to these states, you whooping sum of money going to the local government coffer. Yet, they couldn't, or they wantonly, or they refused to pay this minimum wage. And of recent, the federal government, with another striking performance and policy, introduced the Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit to oversee the joint account of state and local government, giving local government what we call financial autonomy. All the 36 state governors rose unanimously in a meeting under Governor Abdulaziz Yari of Zamfara. They came against the government and said, we will not be able to give local government financial autonomy. Now, how would these same governors pay this minimum wage? Let me start from you.
I have said it before.
Say it again.
That every underdevelopment that has been witnessed in the past in the country lies on the non-performance, dereliction of duties on the parts of the governors. How can, some states are actually trying, so we have to distinguish. Some states are paying 24,000 minimum wage, despite the federal, the law stipulating 18,000.
Like which state?
Like those states, under Oshomole implemented it. Being a labor chairman before, we have River State is paying more than 18,000. And Lagos is paying more. So any governor like Abdulaziz Yari of Zamfara, who is known for non-performance,
you are talking to the chairman of governors.
I learned this
governors fund. 16 months.
This is a governor that has never,
like 4 years.
He has never spent straight 1 week in Zamfara State. And Zamfara is one of the poorest states in Nigeria. Zamfara is one of the states where lives and properties are at risk constantly. The primary duties of the government established in section 14, section 17, subsection 2, paragraph B, which is protection of lives and properties.
I know you are a lawyer, you have not been
protection of lives and properties has been jettisoned. The governor of Zamfara State, as it stands today, and other of his cohorts who are co-travelers in this anti-people policy.
But is Zamfara State paying salaries?
They have not paid for months.
They say they are owing.
These governors have no business in governance. They have no business in government.
How could you owe civil servants 60?
They have no business in government and ought to resign in the interest of the people.
Federal allocations.
Do you know how much that comes into their coffers? Paris reform, bailout fund, Buhari was doing everything to ensure they pay salary.
In my state where we were quarreling that Governor Tom is not paying salary, it means Governor Tom is even better. Because
it's better than some
Tom has not paid salaries like about 13 to 14 good months now in Benue. And he has agreed that he will pay the minimum wage. I'm asking how is it going to be possible for them to pay 30,000 minimum wage if they have not been able to pay the 18,000? This is where I think the policy of this financial autonomy is completely welcome. Because we will not see that. What do you have to say about it, Mr. Economist?
Let me begin by saying it is very, very unfortunate of us as a state to find ourselves in the mess we have found ourselves today. And that is because we keep recycling leaders that lack the integrity to carry along the welfareism of the state, and even that is the masses at heart. There is nothing, they don't even have the conscience. You see, even when Goodluck Jonathan implemented the 18,000 naira minimum wage, I must tell you, a lot of governors up till now are not paying that 18,000 naira minimum wage to the full. Some, in some states, they are paying 10%. Some, they are paying 11%. Some, 12%. They pay according to their will.
And their own salaries and allowances
and
emoluments are guaranteed. Monthly overhead cost guaranteed from the federal government. I think,
and you know what?
We will dwell on this topic again on Monday. I want us to have a look at the governance under these various governors with respect to this minimum wage. Because if striking policies like this are coming up from the FG, the onus is on the governors to perform, implement. You are not a governor until you are responsible to be one. And responsibility is leadership. Exactly. Leadership is not in the title. You are a governor, you are a chairman, you are a president, you are a councillor. I see it as burdens of responsibility, and you have to also be responsible, take forth for every anomaly that happens in your state or in your country. I see this policy as a wholesome policy that will, alleviate the poverty level of the common masses in this country. And if the governors want the people to follow them, to respect them, also to be responsible, to be accountable, to be fair to the people, it is proper that they pay in the 30,000, they implement it quickly and begin to pay. And also clear the arrears of salaries. Those states owing salaries, they know themselves. Those governors owing salaries, they know themselves. They have to clear those salaries and then begin to pay immediately this new increment in the minimum wage. That is where we are going to stop today on Spectacle. Monday, we shall continue to look into the review of these very policies, and we'll continue again, bring more economic implications and productivity as regards the Nigerian economy. Thank you once again. I'm your host, Daniel Atai.